In this episode, we mount up our L15B7 and we start taking axle measurements so we can get the power to the wheels. Welcome to the VTEC Academy. You're about to get schooled.
Dude, cleaning cars blows.
So we have the Integra up on the lift, and we're gonna install our L15B7. This is kind of similar to a K-Series. The motor, not quite as wide as a K-Series, but still wide enough that this mount bracket that sits on the frame rail is gonna be in the way. So part one, to prep the engine bay, is to take this off. Now on the K-Series, this actually interferes with the differential. I'm not sure if it does on the L15. We're gonna check it out and see if that can stay in there or if the differential goes back in there too far and interferes. This car, we noticed, actually had its ABS removed. So I'm not gonna be able to check to see if our new bracket interferes with the ABS. Although, I'll be honest with you, I assume it would. So the ABS on these cars is kind of interesting. I think in '98 they changed to a new unit that is a lot more compact, sits farther away, and that that '98 unit, pardon me, chemicals. That '98 unit sits farther back and probably wouldn't interfere with our bracket, but the one that comes in the '94 to '97 probably will. So that's unfortunately we're not going to be able to test that today. But we have a few things we need to take off, and then we'll try it in the car, see how it works. You bet. So in the past, when I was removing spot welds, I would use something like this. This is a half-inch pilot drill. They also come 3/8 inch, and I would usually use either half-inch or 3/8. Oftentimes, you would have to reach way in to get the spot weld, and unfortunately, this would always leave a little hole in the frame where the pilot hole would go. That's why it's called a pilot drill. The rotor broaches, though, this pilot part is retractable. So it's only supposed to really dig around the outside of the spot weld. I imagine these come in different sizes. Hopefully these are big enough. But I used one of these back, I think around 2004 when we did one of the first EG swaps. And it dulled pretty quickly. Anyway, finally, 18 years later, decided to give it another try. Try to get a few less holes in it, see how it works. We did have to drill a small pilot hole because this wanted to walk when we just used a center punch to drill it out, but we'll see how it works out. I wonder if these are available real long. That would be kind of cool too. If they came in a much longer version of it, that would be nice. But anyway, these are available on Amazon. You can check out our Amazon link. It'll be down in the description. It did a really good job of removing the first piece very cleanly. You can see there's almost no extra holes going on there. Oh, and another part I brought. Here, hand me that other piece of metal. This is actually for removing brackets as well. It's hardened steel, and it looks like a knife's edge. I'm sure you could hurt yourself with it. But basically just put it behind the sheet metal, and then you can use a hammer to drive it in there and just kind of work up any edges that you might not have cleaned up with the rotor broach. So, two cool tools we're trying out today.
Light your cigarette with the spark. I'm not putting my face up for it. Not enough. Not enough heat.
we got the bracket off. I actually went in and filled in some of the holes with some JB weld. I like that better than Bondo. It's a lot grippier. So we filled in a couple of small holes with some JB weld. It's curing right now. As you can see, we'll go back and sand it. But right now we need to put our new engine side bracket in. This is real similar to the ones that come on the EGK and stuff like that. Basically, it slides over the frame rail. You use the torque mount bolt holes to line it up. Once you do that, you can mark where these top holes are. You drill a hole, and then Hasport hardware drops through the torque mount nuts all the way. You tighten them down lightly to about 15 foot-pounds, and then you torque the bottom nuts down real tight, and that holds it on the frame rail. So we need to put that in, and then we can proceed with installing our motor. We are going to pull the motor back out again so we can paint that area that we just took the bracket off of. But right now, we need to find out what size our axles are, so we need the engine in to determine that. All right, so on this second hole right here, it wasn't, there was actually a hole there already, but it wasn't exactly centered where I had marked the new hole. And unfortunately, I let Scott at it before I had a chance to talk to him about it. But here's something that I've done quite often. I'll use this type of hole drill, the step drill. And what happens is you can start going in where the pilot drill is, and you can take and direct the hole cut. So when it's cutting the hole, it's not exactly centering on it. It'll actually cut more towards one side, so you can actually drift the hole somewhat in order to get it. What we'll do is, if it winds up not being exactly where we need it because the pilot would have been slightly off, we'll just take a file and elongate it in the direction we want. But if you want to try and put the hole where you want to, you can try one of these step drills and then just put pressure on it, and it'll cut more on the side where you're putting pressure, and you can actually drift the hole a little bit, which sometimes makes life a little bit easier. Do not over tighten these. If you do, you'll actually pull the nuts up off the inside of the frame rail. The nuts that work with the torque mount, they are underneath and inside the frame rail, and they're just lightly attached on with a couple of spot welds. So if you over torque this, you're going to pull them off. And then these go in from the bottom and get tightened down to whatever the torque setting is that we recommend. I can't remember off the top of my head. We're just going to put them in lightly right now because we are going to be taking this back out again in order to paint. All the appropriate bolt holes are open. This is how this goes on. We'll be putting it in from underneath. Yeah, probably. Let me shift this back.
Oh, it's touching the bar right now.
It's going to touch it? All right, let's go ahead and take the bar out. The end.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't as tight as those mounts.
I know. We are going to try mounting it at the higher position, so we have the flange on the high side. Like I explained before, these mounts can be flipped. The Integra, I'm hoping, has more hood space, so hoping I can get up the high spot and it fit fine. Whoopsie. Dent my metal fender.
Oh, it's carbon fiber.
I know.
The socket's probably bottoming out.
Oh wait, there's my phone right here. All right, we got the engine in place. We actually mounted it at the higher position. I want to see if the hood interferes. I'm pretty sure it's going to. This stuff is all very tall. This is a lot of the emissions control devices. I'm not sure if we can pull any of that stuff off without causing the computer to kind of throw conniptions, so we'll check that out. This also looks like it's a bit high. This is the electronic wastegate. We could probably just reclock this, so that might be the solution for this part. But if we're going to hit here, I'm going to need to look at the wiring and the ports to see if we can't figure out a way to reroute some of that stuff. I mean, this is really the high part, and it may just be a question of removing some of the skeleton. Once again, well, actually we don't know until we try this. That was all speculation. Let's look at the facts. We're hitting on the wastegate?
No.
Yes, for
Valve
sure.
cover, I think. Right there on that rib.
This particular hood is a JDM carbon fiber version hood, so I got to decide whether or not I want to chop it up. Let's look at the ground clearance. Right now we have it at the high position. The ground clearance is almost ideal. It looks like we're hanging down about a ½ an inch below the lowest part of the subframe. Just on the oil pan right here. If I put a splitter on the car, that's going to do a really good job of protecting the oil pan. So I kind of care that the car has really good ground clearance. Again, this is going to be a road racing car, so you know, hitting curbs and stuff like that, I don't want to be grinding on the oil pan. If we wind up dropping it down, and it drops down a little bit over an inch when we flip the mounts, if we wind up dropping it down, I would definitely put a splitter in to protect the oil pan. So we're going to go ahead and trim the hood and see if we can get it to work. But before we do that, we need to try the axles on. So let's pop the wheels off and then see what we can do about axles. Our Buddy Club wheels came pre-dented.
There it is. Not that it won't. Oh wow.
Long enough?
That one's like perfect.
Yeah.
And that's got to be under an 8. That's
And that's be under a quarter.
Yeah, so row 6, row
Cool.
7.
All right, so that's perfect. Kind of good news here. This is a base RSX left-hand axle, and it happens to be the right length. It's well within a ½ inch, which is our ideal size, would be flush, but anything within a ½ inch works out really well. So base RSX for this side. We need to find out what's on the right-hand side, but I don't have an intermediate shaft. I got one coming. It'll be here tomorrow, so we're going to put off till then. What I'm going to do right now is kind of chop up some of the skeleton inside the hood and see if I can't get the hood to close over our engine the way it is. Oh, are you able to get it off? Oh, cool.
I had to loosen that to
Mhm.
it, but oh, and that'll rotate infinitely.
Yeah. So we should be able to just turn it. Question is it symmetric? Probably need to lift that over.
Yes. It looks like it is.
Symmetric? Cool.
Yeah, so you can
The-
do it
there
that
is-
way or do it that way.
Yeah, we'll do it that way. Well, actually, this may not reach if we do it that way.
Yeah.
The intake air tube comes back across
the
here,
housing comes back up,
So-
yeah.
we may not be able to rotate it backwards.
I doubt it, depending on that, I doubt we'll be able to go
Down?
80.
No, I don't think
Depends
so.
on how tight that is.
No, the tube comes straight out here. So you have this one that comes out and loops around, although we could actually come straight off and go down here with our intake and put our intake down there. And avoid going over here all together.
Oh, they had a crossover going because of the airbox. Going to an airbox. over
Right.
there. Yeah, yeah.
So this is the intake. The air box is right here.
Oh, yeah, and that's the charge. So
Yeah. So we could just come out and down, come out over there. Thank you. No.
That is so weird. What the?
I think this hood, as it's metal, this is the sheet metal. But when they made it, they made it in two pieces, and they just taped it up so that they could make the whole mold have both pieces. And then they just stuck them together.
Nice.
So, other than cutting about 20% through there, I think we're okay. Right here. Right there. Probably that.
Oh, where does that edge come down? Right there? Oh no, that edge is way far forward, so it must be just that.
Could be this.
That part.
Oh, you know, we'll take this off, this bracket off, and lay this wire in here.
Sorry, bro. And I was gonna lose
It's hitting here, or here, or here.
right here.
It is right?
Yeah, you can see it come on and flex up once you push down.
Okay. Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Oh.
Right there.
You can see it flex.
Right there.
Gabagoo, yeah.
That thing, probably specifically.
Probably. But all this stuff right here is higher
Yeah.
than the rest of it.
So,
That's a little hard to move.
actually it may not be. We're making contact right here. This, probably a purge valve of some sort. I'm gonna take it off and see if it's going straight into something. If it isn't, we might be able to extend the tubes and bring it out here. You know what I mean? Extend that and just kind of get it out of the way. Why don't you go ahead and perch it up? The thing is that we can probably cut this down, you know what I mean? If we're not mounting this to it.
Yeah. We can just hook a line right to the.
Yeah, this can be remounted out here somewhere because we're not going to have an airbox here. Because the airbox could go, if we wanted to go back over top, we could put it over here. If we want to go out this way, we can put it down here. So, I think with this gone, and that gone, let's see if it closes now.
Better. I can still see.
Well, interesting. I think what I might wind up doing is actually making a new iteration of this mount kit that drops it down about another quarter inch, would you say?
Yeah.
Quarter inch. And then I'll have to think about whether or not I want to make the flip be less pronounced. Because then it would wind up being basically an EG kit and a DC2 kit. But as of right now, it will fit underneath this hood. It's going to rub a little bit, but I'm not terribly worried about that because what's rubbing is not, I don't think anything is rubbing is anything other than a metal bracket, so we might just trim it up and see what we can do. Well, we're going to run it to high position. We're going to make a few arrangements in this area in order to make some more room. We're going to figure out how we're going to mount the turbo wastegate, but I think we're going to have really good ground clearance on this, and this should be an excellent little swap. Oh, you know what? This also was down low, so I think with proper hood spacers up there, that may give us everything we need. So that could be touching. Well, tomorrow we'll have our axle, figure out what our right-hand axle is, and figure out how to make it all work. Okay, we were finally able to source an intermediate shaft. I went through my 20 and did not have one for this car. We were able to find one at a local salvage yard. They got it to us relatively on time. So now what we're going to do is try out our right axle and see how long of an axle that's going to take. We're going to start off with our base RSX. Remember, we found the left-hand axle base RSX fit absolutely fine. It was within, what, 2/100ths of an inch?
Yeah.
The right length, so it was good. So we are now going to try out the right-hand base RSX axle and see if it works. Check out the ball joint. We're like taking it apart. Check this out. That is a bad ball joint. So I'm going to order those when we get done here. Well, that sounded good.
Yeah, crickety.
Seems legit.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're measuring axles, you want to make sure it's parallel with the ground. That's the point at which the axle is going to be its most compressed. So we're going to raise this knuckle up until it gets to level, it looks level, and then compress the axle all the way. Oh, there we go. It's going in. That's a little short.
That's what she said. Michael.
Yeah, it's compressed all the way. You want to measure that? I think this is going to be very similar to the K-Series axles. This axle is too short. How far is it?
Half an inch.
Half an inch. So it's a, if it was a 1/4 inch less, it would probably be fine. But actually, at this length with a 1/2 inch too short, if you were to try to run base RSX axles, you would most likely pull it out of the joint, so which would be a bad thing. So interesting. So we need to make an axle that's a 1/2 inch longer than this. Let's go ahead and pull both axles. We'll check the overall compressed length. That way, anybody who wants to try to make their own axles will have that information. They can give that to a company like Drive Shaft Shop or Insane Shafts, and they would be able to get the axle made up to what size they need. By the way, this is the EX transmission. The inner joints on the EX transmission are the same as the K-Series. So it uses basically K-Series or a cord on the transmission side, and on the intermediate side, again, K-Series inner joint. If you had an SI, it actually uses a slightly bigger joint. So if you were building a transmission for an SI intermediate shaft and transmission, you would want to use J-Series, the V6 stuff. You want to use that intermediate, that inner joint from each side of the transmission. So this axle right here is actually for the 3rd gen fit with a K. You want to try it in real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's try it in. Okay. Okay.
Ooh. That's gonna be, it's over slightly.
But still within the.
Oops, where am I with my tail? 1/10 of an inch.
1/10 of an inch. So we have 2 correct length axles for this. Well, that's good news. All right, so let's go ahead and measure overall compressed length, and we will happily share that information. 23 1/8. Okay, so 23 1/8 inch is the overall compressed length of this axle. Was it too long or too short? It was too short, too long. Wasn't it? Just barely stuck out 1/10 of an inch.
Oh yeah, 1/10 of
So-
an inch. Yes, yes.
So 23 1/16 would be like ideal, ideal length. Be like perfect. But this is well within the limit. So let's measure this one. This one, if you recall, was just ever so slightly short. So
I'll just hold it there and you say when.
when?
It's hard to read. 24 1/8 or so. Yeah.
24 1/8. All right, let's try this. Oop.
I don't know how flat that is.
24 1/8.
Yeah.
So this one was 24 1/8 inches overall. Why didn't we write that down?
Yeah.
We can
And
look at the recording.
I think that it was just about 1/8 under.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, great. We know what size axle. So what we're going to do now, though, take our engine back out and start working on painting that one frame rail that we cut the bracket off of, so that we can put it all back in again for good. Okay, so Scott got the paint, looks pretty good, not bad. We need to do the power steering now, but then after that's done, we can put the engine back in, and we've got our axles figured out, and then the actual real work starts on the whole thing. So have to figure out the radiator and the heater if we want to have defrost in the car. I guess we need to look, see if we even have a heater core underneath the dash, but that would be one thing. And then we've got intercooler piping that needs to be hooked up. We've got the vacuum lines, the evap system, if we're going to be running part of an evap system. Got to hook up the exhaust, the intercooler and piping, the shift linkage. We need to figure out the shift linkage on this. Obviously, we're going to try to use a 10th gen shifter. I like the idea it's nice and tall, so that should work out pretty good. The clutch, we're going to have to run the clutch because the master used to be on this side, now it's over on this side, so we're going to need to run some new clutch lines as well. And then once we have all that, pretty much it's down to wiring. Yeah, that's actually the hard part of this whole thing. That's probably going to take the most time. But we should be able to get that done relatively quickly. We put a deadline on ourselves for 1 month from now, so we're going to work hard in trying to get it done. A lot of people have been asking me why we chose this particular engine, and it has to do a lot with the race classes we wanted to compete in. So we're building this car to a set of race rules, and we thought this engine would be a really good choice. So the two classes, one of them is in grid life, and the other one is an SCCA class. And basically in grid life, you're limited to the amount of horsepower you have, because the more horsepower you have, the heavier your car has to weigh, and we wanted the car to be nice and lightweight. So we chose this motor because it has limited peak horsepower. Now, one of the beauties about this motor is there is a lot of torque at low RPM, and low RPM torque does not translate into a lot of horsepower. So we can really turn up the boost at low RPM on this engine and make it fast and effective as a race car without having a lot of horsepower, and therefore we can weigh as little as possible. Don't have to add a lot of ballast. It should be really, really good for the track. The other thing is the SCCA class, the weight is actually determined by the restrictor. So the more your car weighs, the larger your restrictor can be. We want a very lightweight car, And it just so happens that the size restrictor we would be running on the intake side of the turbo is very, very close to what it is stock. So I think that this engine winds up being a really good match for that particular class. So that's one of the reasons we've chosen this motor in our race car. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of VTEC Academy. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And you can also hit the bell to get notifications whenever we put out a new video, like part 3 of this particular build. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining us. See you later. We've guarded our... Yeah, welcome to the VTEC.